Coming up next, BookTV presents Afterwards, an hour-long program where we invite guest hosts to interview authors. This week, freelance journalist Jay Bahadur and his first book, The Pirates of Somalia. In it, Mr. Bahadur exposes the motivation of high seas hijackers, some of whom made international news with the capture of an American cargo ship in 2009, and later, the murder of 4 retirees who were sailing around the world. Mr. Bahadur discloses how he made his way into the pirates' inner circle and what he believes can be done to stop them. He talks with Clifford May, president of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies.
Jay, let me start with you before we get into the book. You, if I understand correctly, you're 27 years old, you're from Toronto, you were doing marketing research, and then you decided, you know what, I want to get into journalism, and the way you decided to do it was to go to Somalia, research the pirates, and write a book about it.
Yeah, I mean, I used to tell people when I was 4 years old I wanted to be a reporter, and then I forgot about it for a number of years until, let's say, when I was finishing up university, I started to come around to that way of thinking, again, for my career path. And every journalist I spoke to said that if you want to get ahead in today's, really quite struggling journalism market, and especially if you want a job doing international journalism when bureaus are shrinking around the world, you should just go out there and write freelance. So that was my intention. I originally was going to go to Somaliland, which is another independent region to the west of Puntland, where I ended up going, and to cover elections that were supposed to happen in March 2009. Those elections never happened, but as it turned out, I ended up finding a much better opportunity, one that certainly had a better chance of getting my name in print, and it worked out.
Your interest in Somalia is fairly long-standing, goes back to college?
Yeah, I found the country extremely fascinating because it's one of these, I did study in college, and it's one of these places where you see how people actually, it's the closest you get to a Hobbesian state of nature, where you get to see how people actually react when faced with anarchy. And really, there's no such thing as a state of anarchy, because as soon as you get into Somalia, you start learning a bit about it. You realize that local little statelets have cropped up everywhere, and the people, people don't like anarchy. And so semi-functioning regions have pulled together and have formed indigenous governments that function to a greater or lesser extent. So I ended up in one of these territories, Puntland, like I mentioned, on really the eve of the first election in 4 years, when there was a complete turnover of power. So it was a very interesting time, and I think Somalia, the way it's presented, just glazes over the fact that there's so many interesting dynamics going on within the country: clan dynamics, political dynamics, now Islamist dynamics. There's the official transitional federal government in the south, which is just a collection of ex-warlords supported by the international community. So I really think it's one of the most interesting countries in the world. And
when you were deciding to go over there, well, first of all, when you were deciding to go over there, did your parents and your girlfriend and others say, this is a totally crazy thing to do, you have no idea what it's going to be like to work in a place like that, do not do it?
Actually, no. Well, a lot of my friends were telling my girlfriend to talk me out of it. And so I had this sort of fifth column working behind my back, trying to get to me through her. But she never did. I don't know why. And my parents as well, they were very supportive. They were sort of taciturn about it. They didn't overly encourage me, but they never said anything to dissuade me or even threaten to pull the purse strings from under me or anything, because I did need to borrow a little money from them too.
Did you try to get, I assume you did try to get the Globe and Mail, the National Post, American paper, CBC, somebody to give you an assignment to go there so that you would know that you had somebody to write for when you got there?
I actually didn't, because I went there originally with the intention of writing the book. This was actually the goal that I actually thought was completely realistic. It may sound really arrogant or naive, but I really thought I was going to go there and get a book. And in the meantime, I thought, well, if it doesn't work out, my fallback plan is I'll sell some freelance articles, because those major news agencies are so happy when there's any freelancer willing to take peanuts for being in a place where they can't send their own people due to insurance costs and a number of reasons that major newspapers rarely send people to Somalia. And so I wasn't worried about finding someone to take my work, especially if I had really good access to pirates, which I ended up having. The only thing was what I ended up doing is, for a book proposal, you write a sample chapter, and I ended up selling that sample chapter in a condensed version to the London Times. So my first piece, shortly after I got back in March 2009, was a feature in the London Times, which was pretty cool. It was.
When I was your age, when I was 27, I was a young foreign correspondent, and I would for Hearst newspapers. In those days, they had quite a few papers, and one of the places they immediately sent me off to was Northern Ireland to cover the terrorism there. The difference, it seems to me, between then and now is when I went to Northern Ireland, I figured, and I think rightly at that point, everybody would want to talk to me, and no one would want to harm me. They needed me to tell their story. Now, one of the things that's changed is, particularly among terrorists and others who are violent, they no longer quite need you to tell the story in the same way. For example, if they can cut off your head, put it on videotape, and post it on the internet, they've kind of told the story their way, utilizing you. So it's a more dangerous environment out there if you're going to cover people like that. This obviously occurred to you, and actually I think you dealt with it rather resourcefully. Maybe you'd talk a little bit about what you decided to do in terms of security.
Well, my original plan was just to get to Somalia on my own, fly in, ask for directions to the coast, and then try and talk my way into the good graces of a pirate group. And I thought they would, think I was so touched or just crazy or mad that they would take pity on me, and or either that, or they would be blown away by my bravery, and so that wasn't the best plan. I had this vision of I looked at Ale in Google Earth. Ale is the pirate capital where a lot of this explosion happened.
EYL, just for people looking on a Google map.
Yeah, and so I was zooming in and out, looking all over the place, and I noticed on the edge of town a small building, and it was labeled Pirate Checkpoint. So I thought, okay, well, this is easy. I just have to get to this pirate checkpoint, ask to see the pirates, and I'll become one of them. I'll sit around with them and chew khat.
You knew about that already. We'll get back to that later.
God, I love khat. Yes, but so this plan was a little harebrained, and it turned out there was no pirate checkpoint. Some jokester had just written it into Google Earth. But what I ended up doing is I made contact with a local journalist whose name is Mohammed Farole. And he had run...
and you made contact, by the way, through email, through
I just sent
snail
an email,
mail?
and Mohammed emailed me back within 5 minutes. And
you were looking for journalists who were resident in any part of Somalia at that point? You just said, I'll see if there's a journalist.
Somalia,
or Puntland,
Yeah, and so I just sent him an email. I got a response in 5 minutes, and he called me the next day, probably as early as he thought I might be up. So he called at 7 a.m. I wasn't up. So, but I spoke to him, and it was clear he was very eager. And
why do you think he was eager? Why did he want you to come?
Well, his father actually ended up getting elected as president of the region about a week before I got there in January 2009. I just heard his father was one of 16 candidates in an indirect election in Puntland, but he gained something like 75% of the vote. So he was obviously a massive favorite. When I heard this, I just filed it into the back of my mind and thought, well, this is probably not going to happen. But I ended up getting, because of his father's position, I ended up getting great access not only to bureaucrats and politicians, but also his family was the same subclan as a lot of the pirates from Ale. All the original figures who had started out fighting against foreign fishing back in the 90s, early 90s, were the same subclans. So they were happy to talk to me because I was a guest of basically the de facto head of their clan.
And why do you think he wanted you to come? Did he have a message he wanted? Did he hope that you would get out about their clan, about Puntland, about his father? Was he doing real journalism, would you say?
Well, it's certainly a pro-government website he runs. There's no doubt about that. But it is a very high-quality website, and it's not by any means propaganda. It's called Gutaway Online is the name of the website. But it's very, very high quality for a product that's come out of Somalia with very little funding. It's great quality. Definitely pro-government,
Sure.
There's no doubt about that. But Farole's mission, his father, the president, his mission was to rehabilitate Puntland's image on the international stage. And Puntland had essentially been run into the ground by the previous administration, which controlled the government from 2005 to 2009. And in 2008, that government had been so ineffectual it had actually run out of money to pay the security forces, which is one of the factors that led to the rise in piracy at the time. So Yeah, he wanted the book to be